Okay, we're going to do Trails of Tears. Again, you'll find a handout on your page. Okay? All right. So, what was the Trail of Tears? Leo, can you tell us? We've got a bet going that Leo cannot be quiet for the entire class, and I'm pretty sure the money is safe. Okay?
I'm going to try to see if I can get
All right.
last.
What was the Trail of Tears? Okay, the Trail of Tears was when the United States government forced the Native Americans to move from their homelands in the southern United States to Indian Territory in Oklahoma.
Cheese balls.
People from the Cherokee, Muscogee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Seminole tribes were marched at gunpoint across hundreds of miles to the reservation. If they don't be quiet, we're going to throw some people out of class, and I will hold up the iPad to let you see who it was.
And it was at gunpoint too, like the U.S. Army was literally like.
Yep, it was forced. So the Trail of Tears can also refer to the specific march, a forced march, and the path that the Cherokee Nation took from North Carolina to Oklahoma also. Okay. It took place in between 1831 and 1838. Congress actually passed a law in 1830 that was called the Indian Removal Act, and the actual removal of the Native American tribes took about 7 years. They started the act was passed in 1830. They started removing them from their land about 1831. And finished up about 1838. So it took about 7 years for these marches to wrap up, moving people, from the south, like I say, from the southeast. Cherokees was moved from North Carolina to Oklahoma, and of course, this is a walk. That's what they're talking about. They're walking. They're not riding. They're not in wagons, they're not on a train or something of that nature. This is a walk that they're completing. Did they want to move? The people and the leader of the tribes were often divided on the issue, not so much because the leaders thought, hey, this sounds like a great idea, but they just thought they had no choice but to agree to the move. Others wanted to stay and fight for their land. Few of them actually wanted to leave their homeland, but they knew they were not going to fight the U.S. government and win. So it wasn't so much that they were excited about going or that they actually wanted to move. It was just they kind of accepted it, probably thinking if they agreed to it, maybe more of their people could survive the transition. That didn't work out too well either in some cases, unfortunately. Leading up to the Cherokee March, okay, after the Indian Removal Act was passed in 1830, the Cherokee people resisted moving to Oklahoma. Eventually, President Andrew Jackson convinced some of the Cherokee leaders to sign an agreement that they would give up their homeland and that and go to Oklahoma, and that the government would pay the Cherokee people $5 million. Now, $5 million is a bunch of money today. In 1836, 1837, that was a boatload of money. I don't really know how much of that they ever got.
It was not $5 million.
Because the Cherokee people stayed pretty much on reservations and was really a rather poor people for years and years and years. So if somebody got hold of that money, it was not spread out among the Cherokee people. Let's just say that. Okay. The Cherokee leaders, some of them, however, many of the Cherokee leaders did not agree to the treaty, and they actually petitioned Congress begging them to let them stay on their land. So they actually, got representation and went before Congress and begged them to let them stay on their land. And of course, it was denied.
Why did
So they took the land.
Why did the U.S. government have the power to do that?
They owned the land.
How though? They
They
didn't.
took it away from them.
That's so
The
stupid.
strong, it's kind of like if you wanted this piece of paper and you came up here and kicked me in the shin and took it away from me, it's now your paper, right?
I guess.
Yeah, that's the way, unfortunately, that's kind of the way it works,
That would be awesome.
okay?
You would get
So I can
destroyed.
take it.
I guess,
You wouldn't have anything.
It's not exactly the civilized way to solve things. You would like to think that, but think about it, I mean, there's still wars and things going on around the world right now, and it's the year 2020. You would like to think that we would be a little bit more civilized than to try to solve our disputes by killing each other, but that's just, we still doing it, so. Okay. Despite gaining some support in Congress, the Cherokees were told they must leave by May 1838, or they would be forced from their land. And when May arrived, only a few thousand Cherokees had left. So President Jackson sent in General Winfield Scott to remove the Cherokees by force. Okay?
I do not like this president guy.
2020.
General Scott and his soldiers round up the Cherokee people into large prison camps called stockades. In many cases, the Cherokees were not allowed to gather up their possessions. So not only were they being forced off of their land, at some points in time, they weren't even allowed to
Get their
gather up
bows.
what their belongings to go. During the summer, some groups were forced to start marching to Oklahoma. However, many people died from the heat and diseases. The remainder of the people were held in camps until that fall, where the weather cooled down a little bit. Of course, now they're trying to walk into winter time also. So, trying to cover 1,000 miles on foot, it's not really a great time of year to attempt that. Talking about diseases, you got to understand, once the Native Americans had never been exposed to a lot of the diseases that
All the white people.
that white men had, okay? Smallpox being one of them. Smallpox wiped out a lot of Native Americans back in the days. In fact, it was probably the first form of germ warfare that we had when there would be an outbreak of smallpox. People died from smallpox. It was pretty common back in those days to die from it. But they would take the blankets that these people had used and trade them to Indian tribes to spread the disease.
That's
Yeah.
terrible.
So,
Wouldn't they do that in the war too for like others?
yep. So, again, not the greatest of times. In the fall, the rest of the Cherokees headed out to Oklahoma. It took them several months to travel around 1,000 miles across mountains and wilderness terrain. The journey lasted into the winter months, making it very difficult and dangerous. Along the way, thousands of Cherokees died from disease, starvation, and the cold. They estimate that probably about 4,000 Cherokees died on the Trail
Just
of
Cherokees.
Tears. And that's
Just.
just the Cherokees. Okay, that's just the Cherokees. The Trail of Tears is one of the darkest, most shameful events in American history. The famous poet Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote of it at the time, saying, "The name of this nation will stink to the world." Okay. Today, the path of the Cherokee is memorized by a Trail of Tears National Historical Trail. And some of the interesting facts. The persecution of Native Americans didn't end with the removal to Oklahoma, unfortunately. much of the land that were promised by law in
By
Oklahoma
law.
was soon taken away from them also.
The reserve, like where they,
Yep. The Cherokee was given money to buy food along the way. However, they ran into a lot of dishonest suppliers that would sell them bad food at high prices, causing many of them to starve. John Ridge was a Cherokee leader who had agreed to the removal treaty. And when they got to Oklahoma,
the Cherokee.
the Cherokee men, some of the Cherokee men that survived the march, that had probably lost possibly their wife or the
Children.
child or something of that nature, assassinated Mr. Ridge. They were not real happy with him. And about 17,000 Choctaw people were forced to march to Oklahoma, and it is estimated that at least 3,000 of them died on this journey. Yes, sir.
I think you're, Leo, you look like you really
You're gonna have to read that to me, Leo. I can't hear you. Leo needs to go to the bathroom. He wrote a note. So,
What's your
bye.